Hi everyone, I'm going to have a look at this Sony tape deck in this video. I've done a few of these how-tos before and they've proved quite popular, and a few people have asked me to have a look at other tape decks. So here we've got another one. Again, it's a Sony, so it's a similar sort of idea to the other ones I've done before, but this one's a 3-head deck and it's one of the popular TCK models. These are from like the early to mid 90s. There's many variations of them being such models such as the 415, 411, 511, 515, 561, etc. They're all pretty much the same mech inside. Once you get to the model above this, the 611, it's slightly different is the mechanism that's in it. The principles are the same, it's the same board, etc. There's just a few extra bits and daughter boards. So it's the same sort of principle. I'm pretty sure I've got a 611 kicking about which needs a repair, so I'll do a video for that one as well once I get to it. So hopefully it does just give you some ideas what to look for. Even if you've got a totally different deck, it still gives you a few pointers and ideas what to look for when trying to fault find what's wrong with a deck. So this one, it all powers up. As you can see, it's had a few dints and knocks which we'll sort out with the casework, not a problem. This one actually opens and closes. You do find quite often on the Sonys that they come into you with a tape stuck in them, and that's usually caused because the heads have locked up in position so you can't remove the tape. That's usually the capstan belt that's failed because it turns, well, I'll show you inside once we get in. They have two belts on these. They have a mode belt which basically rewind, forward wind, etc., and a capstan belt which turns the capstan but also helps turn the actual main assist, etc., because you don't have an assist motor on these. So the first thing to do is put a tape in and see what's working and what isn't. Usually you find these won't play, but they'll forward wind and rewind. As you can see on this one, we don't even get a forward winding or rewinding. So we don't even have forward wind or rewind on this machine, which goes to show that the mud belt has perished on it. Nor do we have any movement at all on the heads. Nor is the capstan even trying to turn. I've just put my finger on it to feel it. So capstan belt's gone as well. So it's pretty much a well neglected deck, as you can tell with the state of it. It's quite grotty in there, to be honest. So what we'll do now is we'll just whip the case off and see exactly what's going on with this machine. On these, it's two screws on either side, left and right, and as you can see, nothing on the back. As you go up in the range, you do tend to get an extra screw just there, but on the majority of the models, it's just the 4 screws to either side. So what we want to do is pop the lid off, see what's going on inside. If you've had any of these machines or similar models open in the past, you'll see that the main board is pretty much identical on all the machines. The only difference is the amount of dot boards or where they're located and some extra components. They all use the same basic board on these machines. Likewise, on these particular models, the mech is all fastened to the front panel. On other variations like the TCK models, you'll find that the bottom of the mech has a different type of board. It's still the same mech, but the boards on the back are different and they connect directly to the board and only have the one ribbon cable rather than the extra cables on this machine. It's just simply cost cutting from Sony on the newer generation machines. As I say, these are an earlier model, so they don't have the connection, but everything else applies. So this one's your mode belt here with the drive motor for it, and as you can see, if I just get in, the fact that I can pull that belt, I mean that's how bad that belt is. It's, you know, proper, it's like 5-6 times its original size, so it's not snapping. It's not turned to goo yet, but you know, it's well past its there. You do find on a lot of these decks that the mode belts are fine, but the main capstan belt has failed. They usually turn to mush and wrap themselves around, so you have to strip it down and give them all a good clean. And then your capstan belt is usually on this pulley here, and as you can see already, again, it's that baggy, it's just pulled off, it's just fallen off and it's on the verge of turning to mush. Here's that. So what we need to do is get the mech out. We'll change the pinch roller while we're at it as well. The pinch roller is a bit hard to see the condition of it at the moment, but judging by the state of this machine I wouldn't want to leave it in, and judging by the state of everything else. We'll disconnect the power to it. First things first, we'll remove all the cables. So remove them from the mech itself, which are these two here, from the two boards, and then disconnect your front panel cables for the controls, and then all your cables here. It's a good idea to invest in a static kit if you don't have one. I'm fully ESD protected in here. I'm actually stood on an ESD mat, and I've also got an ankle chain on, so it doesn't get in your way in your hands. But a simple bracelet for your arm and a decent mat such as what's on this, all lifted up, is more than adequate. You can get little kits that people use for PCs, etc., which would be fine to do this. Just give you that little bit of extra protection. So make sure you disconnect cables for your heads. So everything should be disconnected now. You've also got an earthing tab there. On some machines the earthing tab is actually screwed to this point here. I don't know if you can just see that screw there. Some of them are actually on a tab and screwed there, so just make sure you do disconnect it. You should find now that everything is disconnected that you need to remove. So you need to remove the front panel. On this machine it's not a problem. You just remove this one here, this one here, this one here, and this one here, and this one that holds the mech in. As I said, different variations. The models have screws in slightly different place. Some of them have the actual feet moulded to the front panel as well, so you'd have to remove those screws as well. You don't on this one because they're actually separate, proper feet as I call them. You also find that on some machines you've got two screws to remove here. On this one again you don't, it's just the one. So we take those out and then you'll be able to unclip the front panel. So now we're ready to remove the front. Again, it varies model to model. On this one there's no clips, but some of them have a plastic clip that comes across here with a perforation that you have to pull out and then pull the front panel off. On this one there's no such worries, you just simply pull and it always falls off as such. So we don't need the PCB chassis at the moment. All we need to do now is to access this. Now we've got the front panel off, and what we need to do now is remove the actual mech from the front panel, because we're going to give it a full strip down and clean while we're at it. If you only wanted to change the belts and not do anything else with the machine, you don't need to go as far as I'm going to do now. All you need to do is to remove these two screws here and that screw, and the whole thing clips off. I'll show you that later on in this video anyway, once we get to that point, but for now I'm going to take the front. But for now I'm going to remove this from the front panel. If you haven't done so already, make sure you've taken off your door. All they do is clip off. You slide it up and it comes off. It's very easy. And if you do happen to have a tape stuck in here on one of the machines that you've got, you will need to take the front panel off to get the tape mech out. And you're probably wondering, how do I get the tape out if the heads are stuck up? Well, that's not a problem, because you can either remove the back and reset the heads, which I'll show you in a few minutes, or you can try and do it manually if you want to try and get your finger in there by turning the capstan flywheel there until you get a click, and if you don't hear anything happening, push the mode assist lever there and keep turning it, and eventually the heads will go down. It's not going to do it on this one because the heads are already in the down position, so I can't reset it to show you. But it's very simple to do. It's just a little bit fiddly. But you will need to do that so you can get the tape out to then remove it from the front panel so you can access everything. Now you're going to need a smaller screwdriver end to remove this. In essence, you've got this screw, this screw, this screw and this screw. Just turn it around so you can see what I'm doing. That's these two screws now. There we are. Now if we just open the door, you'll see the back of this here is a plastic panel. All you need to do is lift the mech up and then slide it with the door, and you'll see that it comes loose. And that's the mech out. Some machines do have, such as this one here, which I forgot to do, a little tie wrap just holding the cables in place. So you just need to remove your head cables, and again we're now done with that part as well. So now we just have the mech to play with. Now we've got it out, you can have a general look and see what's going on. Now that it's been taken out, it doesn't actually look as bad as it did. I think it was more dirt in the actual chassis than on the actual mech. It's quite clean and tidy. Solder appears to be in quite good condition. I do actually have a magnifying light so you can actually check for any dry joints while you're at it. Not something I'll touch on in this video, but just something I do usually as part of it. Now if I have a look inside, for example, you can see the capstan there is quite grotty. You could try and clean that off with a cotton bud and some isopropyl, but because we've got the machine apart, we're going to be taking it further apart. What I will do is I'll pull this out and clean it by hand with a microfiber cloth and some isopropyl, give it a good clean and polish up. Heads look to be in very good condition, which is good. They just want a good clean. Now something to check on these is the plate, which I'll show you in a moment. First things first, we'll just take the door off. Very easy to do. Slightly push. Very easy to do. Slightly push that end until it slides above as such. Don't worry about snapping it because you won't. Now open it. As you'll see, that end's come loose. Gently pull the other end out, which is keyed just to go in one way, and your spring, but don't lose your spring, otherwise it won't work properly. So you can see we've taken everything out there now. Something we want to check is this plate, which the head and everything sits on. As I mentioned earlier, you can have problems with these. There's not much that holds it in place. Now, I'm not sure if I can show you very well on the camera, but you have a very tiny plastic clip there. There's another one just underneath the capstan, which I'll show you how to remove in a moment, under the pinch roller should I say. So what I want to do now is have a look at this plate and just make sure everything's okay with it. As you can see, it's springing straight back straight away, so there's nothing stuck or any dried up oils or anything under there, because Sony don't tend to usually put any oil or anything on here. But I've seen people in the past repair these and cover them in God knows what underneath, and then it all seals and makes them stick, and that's what one should be like, just, you know. Another thing to look for on these is to make sure it's all flush when you move it up and down. There should be no play in it. If you just pull the metal plate there, as you can see, it's hardly moving. You're looking for any variation along the plate and the bottom, and as you can see, let's do it gently without trying to move the bottom. Hopefully you can see there's hardly any play there, which is good. What tends to happen with these is, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, tapes get stuck in them, people force the doors and it bends the plates, and the only thing that holds this plate in the top, you might think, oh, this is holding it in, it isn't. The only thing that holds the plate in is this very tiny little plastic clip, and they break off. If that breaks off, then, well, to be honest, you may as well just throw the mech away, because it's no good for wooden parts. And the amount of these that I've got as spares for heads, etc., where people have broken that, there's not a great deal you can do. If you haven't actually got the piece of plastic, you couldn't even glue it back on, and usually they break off. It's rattling around inside the machine afterwards, or it breaks off and goes ping somewhere, and that's it. What happens then is, even when you put it back in, the whole of this top plate moves forwards, and then it slides out from the two retaining clips at the bottom, which means the entire plate is loose, and then you don't get any audio, or your sound quality is terrible, or your chew tapes, and that's all because of this one plate here. So if it's chewing tapes or anything like that, that is most likely down to this plate is bent. So next thing to check, just want to have a look at the pinch roller. Very easy to get to on these. There's no alignment issues to worry about. So you probably just see that piece of plastic there. You bend it, and you can pull it up. So let's pop it down. So as I say, you've got this little clip here. I'll do it with a pair of tweezers so hopefully you can see better. Yeah, I'll take it from the bottom so you can see. I'll bend it from the bottom so hopefully you can see better. So you bend that back. So we bend that back as so, and the entire thing just slides up like that. And that's it. That's all you need to do. The spring and everything will stay intact. Another thing to watch for on these is that's all plastic, and it's just a pressure fit into a little tiny hole, plastic hole. It's like something to watch for. The shaft on here, it's like everything else on here, it's plastic, and all it is just pushed on a press into the hole. The hole's a lot smaller than that, but just to give you an example, it's a plastic pin that pushes through there, so it's simply friction holding it in place. Now it should be nice and tight like that. If you've got any play in it at all, pull it out, put some glue on it, and then push it back in, because if there's any play on that, again, you'll have issues as if that plate was loose. It will chew tapes or crinkle tapes, or it just won't sound right. So a pinch roller, simple. If only other manufacturers were like this. A lot of them, like Technics especially, decide that you have to pretty much break the thing to get it apart on your earlier models. So all you do with this, just put something flat bladed underneath, and that's it. That's all you need to do. Clips out of place. And as you can see, that is actually, it's not the worst I've seen. There's a few blemishes, as you can probably see there. I'm not sure if you can see on the camera, but there's like a circle blemish there. Now if you were playing a tape, you would every time the pinch roller rotated against the capstan, you'd get a momentary bit of flutter on the tape, so you'd hear something that didn't sound right on the tape. It might slow down slightly or speed up slightly, or just sound a little bit odd, or lose the highs, and that's simply because your roller is perished. But bear in mind, you're looking at what, 25, 28-year-old rubber there, so change it. I always keep plenty of pinch rollers in because they're quite popular. A lot of machines are the Sonys for me. So you can reuse, you can buy these. Just a little word about these, there's different versions you can get. This is the ones that I usually use. I just buy them in bulk, and they're perfectly fine and the same size. If you got a micrometer to measure them with. They're exactly the same. The only difference is there's more plastic. So you can use the original shaft because the metal. So all you do, just line it up, your shaft reasonably square. And that's it, you're in. Now you can see freeze turning. So all we do with that, slightly push the mech up a little bit. And there you go. So that's your front bit done, other than giving it a clean, which I'll show you shortly. We're all done. We can then move on to the belts. So we want to remove this one here, because that holds your mode sensor in place. And then these two here. Well, we're a little bit tight. That's a good sign that no one's been in the deck before and been playing with it. This one's got an earth tab on it. So you want to make sure that you put it back in. On this machine it's actually fastened, soldered in, which is good, to the base plate of the motor. And then, as mentioned, we've got these two little hooks there. So in essence you just open it like a book and then lift off. And as you can see, these belts are, this one's actually on the verge, as you can see here, hopefully. I'll just get the camera in to show you. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, they usually turn to nasty goo, and you can see that this one is on the verge. It's just snaps literally in my hand. It's on the verge of going to goo, as this one. So it gives you an idea of just the nastiness that you have to deal with on these decks if they've actually turned. They take a good hour or so to clean up properly. So we'll just remove the mud belt. Again, it's enormous, is that? In fact, you could strip it, you stretch it to 4 or 5, well, about 7 or 8 times its original length, that. Just to give you an idea of what it should be like. That's the one that's taken off, and that's your new one. The new one. The old one. So if you've seen my other videos, we all know how easy it is to do these. You just pull it round, and then slowly, it's thoughtfully provided 2 little tabs. Just make sure that's in the right place, which it is now. So that can freely spin all the way around like so. Now, I mentioned earlier about if you've got a tape stock. I'll just give you an example on that, on what to expect. Normally the machine would be in that position, so your heads will be set like that. As you can see, if I just pop a tape over, you would see that your heads are stuck in. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to show you, imagine that this machine had a tape stuck in it. As you can see, it's not stuck at the moment, but I can raise the heads manually just by pushing the mode wheel over. So the heads are now up in a lock position. As you can see, the heads are there, they're up, and if the door was on, you wouldn't be able to get that tape out without bending that plate at the bottom. So if you have got on one of these machines and your tape is stuck, all you need to do is push this here, like that, you'll hear the click, and then turn the flywheel, and then push it again. You are now in the proper position for reassembling the deck. So you want to make sure that as you look at like the little Pac-Man face, he's just to the side there. So it's 2 clicks from play is what you want to be listening for. Now there's a little plastic washer, which will be a little bit awkward to get off because of all the gunk. So you just remove that, and then you can lift the capstan out. You'll find there's also another washer on the inside. You don't lose them. They're there for a reason. And now you've got your pinch roller, so you've got your capstan out, so now you can just give it a good clean rather than trying to use cotton buds in a confined space. Use the good old isopropylene. Just a bit on, and then give it a nice clean. This is something you would need to do to the entire flywheel if your belt had decided to melt and stick all the way around it. This is a nice easy way to clean it though, rather than having to do it in a confined space. So just keep giving it a good clean, and if you've got any really hard bits that won't come off, just use your nail. You're not going to damage anything, and then just give it a right good clean. Don't be worried about using a bit of force to do it. There we are, and hopefully you can see it's a lot cleaner than it was. So just pop your small washer on the top and then pop through. And remember to put your retaining one on. It's very important this one goes back on, because this is what stops your capstan from sliding back and forth, and if it slides back and forth you have loads and loads of web and flutter, which is something I'll cover about later with my meter. So you're now pretty much ready just to put your capstan belt on and then reassemble the deck. Once again, as I've covered in earlier videos, it's easy enough to do this, just on other Sony decks that I've shown you. Just put your belt around, and then once again there's some little pins there to hold it on. So you're now ready to put everything back. Just locate those clips there. Just make sure that you make sure that you got that in the right position, which is like so. Then you can just use your retaining clips, and then you should see that everything lines up. Just so. And then for the moment, just put the one screw in on your earth-in tab. So start with this one first. Now put that one in. And finally, this retainer. The next step, just push down the belt so it clips into place, and again do the same for the capstan. Just slide it up and then just turn on the pulley to make sure everything's where it should be. Just put everything back in. Your spring rests on that point there, in that position. So what you need to do is put the longer part of the door in first, on an angle as so. Pop your spring in. The other part of it latches behind the door, which I'll just try and get a shot of. So that all sits in place like that. And then push. The clip over the metal, and then it'll move it around until it drops into place, which it will do. There you go. And just make sure before you try to close it that you've got the short part of the spring on the back of the door there, and then the long part of the spring into the back of your door recess there. And you should be under your dampener. And you should find then everything closes, and if you push your tab here, there it opens. Leave it in the open position, because we need leave it in the open position because we now need to put the front panel back on. Before you do so, it's just an idea to give that a quick clean. Give it all good clean. If you've got an air duster as well, just give it a blast. And then just slide and it's in place. Now you just want to put your 4 screws back in. That's your top 2 and your bottom 2. One thing to do, which I've forgotten to do here, before you tighten it any further, just lift it up and tuck your head cables around like so, and then you will find there's a little tab there. Just bend it over to hold them in place so they're all neatly out of the way and protected. Now we can put these 2 screws in at the bottom. You have this one here. And this one here. And then this one here. So just line two ends up, and it should all fall back into place like so. And before you go any further, it's a good idea just to fasten the front panel back on. So it's just a reverse of what we did earlier with the screws. Start with the edge. Need to give this a good charge, I think. It's almost flat. So you do your two sides first. Then you need to put your mech one in. This holds your mech in place. And then your final two front panels. This should mean everything lines up nicely. Because it's almost flat, I'll just double check them all by hand. Now we just want to connect everything back. First of all, just put the earth clip back in. Headphone socket. Headphone socket. Record control. Front panel. Just make sure you route everything neatly if you can. Cables back in the clip, and then the back of your mech. And finally, your front panel controls and display. So now you get everything all back together. Should be a case. So now we've got everything back together. That's all sounds as it should. Just put a test tape in. And there's play. Just put some audio on for quickly, just check there's no excessive wow and flutter. Does help if I connect an audio. What we'll do is we'll just quickly check. Rewind's working. Everything's a consistent speed. So everything appears fine. So next stage now normally would be to just run a wear and flutter test on it. I'm going to cover that in another video because I can do that on quite a few different machines and it's quite an in-depth thing, and this video has been quite long already. But usually what you do is you put a test tape in, which is a 10 kHz or whatever frequency you wish to use. So what you would do with that is you would put a test tape in which has got a tone on it, and then you just use your test meter to check everything's in place. You might need to adjust your tape speed, etc. to get it right, which on these is simple. It's just a pot on the back, just down there, and you just, you know, as I say, I'll cover that in another video. So the next stage now normally would just be to check everything is okay, such as tape alignment, wear and flutter, etc. That's usually done with a couple of test tapes and a test gauge. Wear and flutter is easy enough to do. You just put a test tape in, which is a constant signal, and if you've got a wear and flutter meter such as that, you can just adjust it. It's usually a case of your belts should be all nicely tight. Some machines have got a tensioner on them, but on most machines such as this one, your more basic machines, it's simply just a case of adjust your motor speed via the controller until you get it as close as you can to perfect on the meter. You're never going to get them 100%, but you can usually get them pretty much within tolerance of what the service manual says it should be. And that's pretty much it. What we'll do now is put this machine back together. But that's your basics for what you need to look for when you're doing a tape deck. I hope you found that useful. You know, let me know in the comments if there's any machines or decks or anything that you'd like me to do in another video, because I know it can be handy for a lot of people. You know, rather than just throwing them to the tip or going out and buying second-hand decks off eBay and hoping for the best. I'm all for trying to salvage old tech and keep it going. So like I say, let me know if there's anything. So I'll call it a day for that on this video. I will do some future videos in terms of further fault finding, such as the electronic side of things, wear and flutter stuff, things like that. But this was just a general guide as to what to do with the basic mechanics on these decks, in terms of your belts, your capstan, etc. Let me know in the comments if there's any hi-fi equipment or other brands or models of tape decks you'd like me to pop a video up for, or if there's anything else that you'd like me to cover. And as always, thanks for watching. Please subscribe and be safe.